Ahoy there, folks. I'm Captain Benzie, and welcome back to another video for EVE Online. Today, we're doing another podcast-style thought piece because in the comment section of recent videos, I've noticed a recurring theme of a lot of people having the same misconceptions about EVE Online. Therefore, we're going to be doing a video looking at the 3 most uncomfortable truths about EVE Online and how actually they're pretty important to how the game runs and operates, and they're something that should be actively embraced rather than something that's kind of looked at as, oh, I kind of wish that was a little bit different. So, as usual, this is a podcast-style video. It's just going to be me and a thrasher in G244 talking about the 3 most uncomfortable truths about EVE Online. Don't worry about anything that's on screen. Just sit back, relax, and listen to my thoughts. Now, I normally would preface this by saying, hey, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below, but to be completely frank, I'm not hugely open to discussions on these ones. Like, this all comes from having had conversations with the developers through years and years of working with developers in other video games, having studied video game design, this kind of thing. These are truths. I don't want to hear, like, your opinion that I'm wrong about this, because categorically, I know it sounds arrogant. I really know this sounds arrogant, but in this case, it's true. These aren't opinions, right? If you disagree with any of these points, that's not your opinion, man. That's just you being wrong. I really hate how arrogant that sounds. I am aware. But it is the case in this situation. So without further ado, please hit like, subscribe if you haven't already, and continue to, consider supporting the channel via Patreon, PayPal, my merchandise store linked below the videos, and of course by becoming a member of the channel. And again, I do apologize for how arrogant this one sounds. I promise you it is coming from a sincere place where I just want to talk about how the game actually is and how the developers have designed it and why that's okay. So, the first uncomfortable truth about EVE Online is that this is a niche game. And that's fine. So what do I mean by a niche game? Well, I mean it's a game that not everyone is going to like. There are plenty of people who are going to see EVE Online and think, oh, that looks really cool. They're going to watch the different adverts that crop up on YouTube. They often appear at the front of my videos, which I find absolutely hilarious. They're going to watch those adverts. They're going to look at the game. They're maybe going to hear their friends talking about it and be like, oh, that looks really cool. I want to get involved in that. They're going to jump in and then be like, okay, actually, I wish this was like this or that was like that. And that's not what EVE is. Look, okay, we live in a day and age where video games are a mass market product, right? A lot of games these days are launched to do pretty much everything. They account for a wide variety of players. And I think Skull and Bones by Ubisoft is a brilliant example of why this is a terrible idea in the long run. Like, Ubisoft had Assassin's Creed Black Flag, right? Arguably one of the best pirate games ever, and it's technically not even a pirate game. Like, how weird is that? They then spent 10 years trying to develop a standalone pirate game. They had the blueprint for what would make a game like that work, and they completely and utterly screwed the pooch on that one, which is also a saying I absolutely hate, but for some reason I've used it anyway. It is a game, if you haven't played Skull and Bones, that is so bland in all of its aspects. Like, there's just not enough of any one thing. It kind of has a lot of different systems that don't really go in depth. Like, if you want to live the pirate dream, there's just not enough versatility to the sailing and the combat and the plundering. If you want to do the whole going ashore and living in the multiplayer universe side of things, it doesn't really do that either. If you're the kind of person who's into a game like this for the big story, it doesn't do that particularly well either. It's such a tame, bland story that is basically designed to be as inoffensive as possible to get you from A to B. It is a game that has gone for mass market appeal, so it is trying to appeal to everyone. And as is a universal truth, right? If you try to appeal to everyone, you ultimately end up not really appealing to anyone. And this is something I think a lot of the bigger names of gaming have kind of forgotten. And it's why a lot of modern games arise and they're huge for a couple of months and then they fade into nothingness. And 5 years later, we're like, oh, I completely forgot about that game. Whereas games from our childhood that were very niche, were specific to a unique type of person, have kind of, lived through that. They've embedded themselves into our psyche because they were so niche. Gaming itself was such a niche thing back then that the target audience was small enough to direct attention at. If you bought Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time on release, for example, you knew what you were getting into. And you were the person who was looking for that specific grand adventure through a fantasy world with cool dungeons and a little bit of a dark history and cool like puzzles and combat and stuff like that. And you didn't come into that if you were the kind of person who only wanted to play Mario games. If you were a Sonic the Hedgehog fan, you knew what the next Sonic the Hedgehog game was going to be about, and it was there to appeal to you. This kind of thing. Modern gaming has kind of forgotten to do that. EVE Online, on the other hand, does it very, very well. It is a niche game. CCP know their target audience, and they are not interested in trying to widen that audience. They have literally admitted this before anyone starts jumping down to the comment section to tell me I'm wrong. FanFest 2023, I was there. They openly admitted on stage that this game is designed for a very specific type of person. And the people who enjoy this type of game are going to get horrendously addicted to it. They're going to go all in on it, throw all of their support at it, and they will support it financially as well as just with their presence in the game. That is the business model. CCP, black and white, have stated that. You can't argue with that, because they've said that's the case, and the way they have designed things, you look at the history of the game and how patches are, that is how it works. They could easily turn around and make HiSec completely safe to hook in new players, or at least like 1.0 to 0.8 or whatever, make it completely safe where you can't even lock onto each other, so that new players have a quote-unquote comfortable place to start off with and, you know, get into the game. And anyone who's not interested in PvP or in the more sort of risk side of things of EVE Online, they've got somewhere that they can be as well. EVE Echoes showed us that that is a really bad idea and it destroys the entire game as a whole, right? I'm not going to get into the details of that, but if you've played EVE Echoes, if you've watched any of my videos about that game, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And how HiSec being completely 100% safe utterly ruined the game. All I have to say is the word Claralam, and everyone who's played EVE Echoes will know exactly what I'm talking about. EVE is a niche game. There are going to be people who come into this game, look at it and go, yes, this is the game for me. They will dedicate their life pretty much to it. This is why we have the jokes about EVE Online essentially becoming a second job, because people log in that religiously to be part of this game and this community, because it is so specific to exactly what they're looking for. The flip side of this is that there are going to be a lot of people who jump into EVE Online because they think it looks cool, it sounds cool, there's a lot of really cool stuff going on, only to discover that it's not really for them. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. There are enough space games out there that if EVE Online isn't your thing, if you're looking for something a little bit different, there are already games out there that do those things, and that's fine. If you want to be just a solo miner or an industrialist, then there are games that account for that. I mean, for crying out loud, if industry and sort of production chain management and that is your kind of thing, yes, EVE Online will account for that. But then if you're going to sort of complain that, I keep getting my hauler blown up and things, go and play Influence, right? It's a game I've been covering recently, and it's literally that. It's EVE Online, but without the combat and the risk side of things. It's just pure market management and sort of the industrial side of things. You know, there are games out there. I'm thinking of things like, for example, X4, or if you're big on sort of the building your own universe, then Stellaris even, or if you're just into combat, then Everspace. If you look at EVE Online and you say to yourself, I wish that I had a bit more manual control over the spaceship rather than this sort of, point and click kind of thing. There are games out there that do that, space combat simulators that do that perfectly. That is not what EVE Online is. It's not what CCP want EVE Online to be. Therefore, it is not what EVE Online is ever going to be. And thus, the sort of pseudo 1.5 uncomfortable truth here is that nothing you do is going to change that. EVE Online is designed in a very specific way for a very specific person, and if you are not that person, you're not going to change CCP's mind, right? They're not trying to widen the catch net. They are trying to make sure that the people who are into the game have their needs catered for. And so if you are looking at EVE Online and thinking, maybe this game isn't for me, the best thing to do, and I do mean this genuinely, as someone who loves EVE Online dearly, who wants this game to flourish and do well, who loves it when people come up to me and say, hey, I was worried about EVE Online, but I've been watching your videos and I've been inspired to try it and I'm loving it. That is amazing, right? I want people to be playing this game. But if this game isn't for you, it's probably best that you find something that is for you. That's going to make you happier, and it's going to make the people around you happier, because you're not going to be grumpy on voice comms, bitching and complaining that CCP don't do this or CCP don't do that. They're never going to do those things. Like, CCP have a design ethos in mind. You're not going to change that. If you find that EVE Online is not for you, seriously, for your own mental health, go find something that is for you. There are thousands of great games out there that are well worth your time, your money, and your energy. Go play those. Slamming your head against the brick wall, trying to find ways to make EVE Online fit around you, or trying to get the developers to fit around you, it's not going to happen. You're going to wear yourself out. It's just not a good place to be. Don't be that person. Don't do that to yourself, right? So there's your first uncomfortable truth, that EVE is a niche game, and that is fine. That is how it's designed, that is the business model, and that business model works. And I will briefly just talk, before we go on to the second point, as to why that business model works. Like, look, I have friends who are developers who have worked on games like Fortnite and Apex Legends and several other sort of mobile games and other sort of free-to-play model games, right? They will tell you that approximately 98 to 97% of people who play those games never spend a single cent. About 2%, 1.5% to 2% of those people will spend a small amount, $5, $10, $20, maybe a little bit more, but that's about it. The entire game's development is essentially propped up by about 0.5 to 0.7% of the community. Those are the people who will spend literally tens of thousands of dollars and pounds on skins, on new content, unlocking new characters on day of release, that kind of thing. So the idea of having the free-to-play side of things is that you are creating an audience. The 97 to 98% of people who play completely for free are there to provide opponents, shorter queue times, and teammates for the people who are spending ludicrous sums of money on these games. And EVE Online has kind of taken that to heart. Yes, you can buy Omega using Plex. You can earn Plex using ISK, for example. You buy your ISK, you earn your ISK, you use that to buy Plex and use that to get Omega. CCP make more money doing that than they do if you swiping your card to buy Omega, because the amount of Omega required to get the amount of Plex, required to get Omega is more than the cost of just Omega would be. Right? And someone had to pay for that Plex. So the idea of EVE Online is that they are committed, essentially, to appeasing this one very narrow group who they know will spend big money. That's how the game works. And it has worked for 21 years, right? It's doing well. And before we move on again, sorry, I'm giving myself additional points here. The game is doing well. Yes, the argument can be made that, there's probably, 50,000 accounts, and maybe only 10 to 20,000 of those are actually players because of multi-boxing, rah. Not getting into that one here. Stay out of my comment section with that. I don't want to get into that discussion here. We've already had some really weird discussions about that in the comment section on my multi-boxing video. What I'm trying to get at there is that even if it is only 10,000 people playing, the amount of players doesn't matter. The fact is that the game is profitable, right? They're making money. They are surviving. They're paying their developers, and they're paying them well. They're doing this fantastic game. It is profitable. It's making money, and it's still breaking records in the gaming sphere as well. So it's doing well. There's no argument about that either. Oh, EVE Online's dying. It's been dying since 2003, literally, right? That's the meme. Shut up and let us play it. So anyway, the second point, the second uncomfortable truth, and I promise you I will get through these ones slightly faster, is that EVE is a PvP game by nature. There is no such thing as, I don't do PvP. If you undock a ship, you do PvP. Just, you're not hunting, right? If you never undock a ship and your entire thing is just marketeering, that's still PvP. You're still competing and integrating with other players. Like marketeering, buying stuff off the market and selling it at a higher price, is PvP. If you undock a hauler and move it from one high-sec station to another, the threat of being ganked means you are providing PvP opportunities for other people. It is PvP. The fact that you are doing that at a cost that is lower than other people, for example, is PvP. If you are not actively hunting, then you are prey in EVE Online. This is by design. It is a part of the game that is unavoidable. EVE is a PvP game by nature. And if you don't like PvP, if you think that getting your ship destroyed is the worst thing that can happen, see point one, EVE Online is a niche game and that's fine. If you don't ever want to lose a ship, if you think that having your ship blown up is like, oh, this is the worst thing ever, quit EVE Online now. Seriously, you are only going to do yourself mental damage by trying to stick around in a game that is actively hostile. That's the point of EVE Online, right? PvP is the heart of the game. Having talked about the haulers being able to fight back recently, I think that's fine in and of itself. I think a hauler that can shoot a tackle frigate and take it out is fine. I do worry that a hauler that can shoot a tackle frigate and take it out, whilst having more tank than the opposition, the alternative haulers out there, plus having the same amount of cargo space, that's a problem because it's a ship that does more than the alternatives do, at which point it just replaces the alternative. There's been an interesting discussion recently about the Avalanche on Reddit, where they show that you can literally get triple the tank of some of the other freighters out there, whilst having comparable cargo, actually bigger in certain cases, and the firepower of a battleship on top of that. It kind of says, well, why would you ever fly any other freighter when this one freighter does what all the others do better and more on top, right? That's my issue. Anyway, EVE is a PvP game by its very nature. Whether you are a hauler, whether you are a miner, whether you're a marketeer, whether you are actually someone involved in faction warfare, or whether you're just ratting in, Alliance nullsec space. It's still PvP. By undocking, you consent to PvP, you consent to being shot at, you are providing content for other players, even if they never actually get to you. The point is you are there, you are a target, you are providing that content, right? EVE is a PvP game at its core. Every single aspect of EVE Online is player versus player. It's not necessarily you shooting back at them. Sometimes it's just you being shot. Sometimes it's just you trying to run abyssals faster to sell the loot on the market cheaper than other people can, and thus undercutting and making profit that way. Obviously, talking about things like the blueprints, not the red loot, that kind of side of things. So, everything in EVE Online is PvP by its nature, which swiftly brings me into uncomfortable truth point 3. Destruction is necessary. Like, seriously, again, I go back to, if you think that losing your ship is the worst thing ever, quit EVE Online now, because this game is just going to make you sad. I love this game. I want to see you stick around, but if you are not willing to embrace the fact that you are going to lose ships, and that's a good thing, this is not the game for you. And again, EVE is a niche game, and that is fine, right? For every person who tries EVE and doesn't like it, there are people who try EVE and fall in love with it. The trick is finding that second group of people, not trying to widen the catchment net to keep the first group of people around. Because what you actually do by widening the net is water down the experience. You dilute the experience. Whereas you've got currently a group of very dedicated players who love this game to pieces and who are willing to actively support it. If you widen the catchment net, you get more players in, but the vast majority of those players are not paying players. And what you risk is, by diluting the experience, you risk the big payers, the people who drop a lot of money into EVE Online, quitting because this game no longer accommodates them. That's the point. So anyway, destruction is absolutely vital in EVE Online, right? The biggest thing I think that new players need to understand is that losing ships, losing your cargo, losing all the stuff you've worked towards, your stations, etc., is important. If you are an industrialist, you want people to be losing ships so that you can be selling them new ones, so that you can be selling your ores, so that you can be selling your materials, all this kind of thing, to produce those new ships. If no one loses ships, then there's no market for buying your stuff, right? Does that make sense? Same if everyone was completely safe ratting, then all of the stuff that you get from ratting is going to devalue because there's just going to be so much of it, and no one's ever going to need any of it because nothing's getting destroyed. Like the modules that you can earn through ratting, for example, or the blueprints you'd get from Abyssal Dead Spaces. If people have got the ships that use those things, they fitted those modules, and no one's ever losing them, then all of that stuff becomes worthless. That's the point here. Your biggest truth that you need to understand as a player of EVE Online is that shit getting blown up is what is making you profitable. And if you're sitting there going, oh, but it's not profitable for me to lose a ship, then stop losing ships. Be better. Fly better. Learn to avoid being destroyed. Like, it's possible. I live in wormholes. I don't have local. I have to descan like a bitch, constantly slamming that V key to the point that I've had to buy a new keyboard since playing EVE Online because my old one, I wore out the V key. And I couldn't be bothered to keybind it to something else. So I just now have a completely new SteelSeries keyboard here in my hands that is, doing the job for me. Ultimately, that's the point. There are tools in the game to help you survive. If you're not willing to embrace those tools and then you complain that you've been blown up, sucks to be you, right? That's how this game operates. The trick is you need to understand that more destruction is always a good thing. The trick is making sure that it's other people's shit getting blown up, not yours. If you're a miner, then other people having their mining ships blown up is a good thing for you. All the haulers that get destroyed carrying cargoes of ore to market is a good thing for you because it makes your ores worth more. Yes, losing your ships and your ores sucks, right? So don't do that. Make sure it's other people losing their ores and losing their mining ships and losing their profitability. It's a PvP game. You are competing against other players. Don't wish for a safer environment. Just get better at surviving in the risky environment. That is where your profit lies. That is how you succeed at EVE Online. Complaining that, oh, I keep getting blown up is basically saying, I fucking suck at this game. Can someone make it easier for me? No, because point one, EVE is a niche game and that's fine. It all hooks back together, right? It all hooks back together. If you're doing PvE and you keep getting jumped and blown up, then that's keeping it so that ISK doesn't just massively inflate, right? Because you're just earning ISK. If you're getting blue loot or red loot and just selling that on the market to NPC buy orders, you're just printing ISK, which means ISK becomes devalued, right? That's how that works. That's basic economics. Same if you're doing agent missions and you're actually looting for the modules and things like that. If you're going and doing incursions, if you're looking for officer drops, if none of that shit gets blown up, if everyone's doing it completely safely, then suddenly it's not worth doing anymore because the ISK that you earn, the modules that you get just ain't worth shit. So you need destruction to be high. Stop complaining that you're getting destroyed and start, stopping getting destroyed, right? Instead of going, oh, it sucks that I keep losing ships, just stop losing ships. Fly better. Stop watching Pornhub and going AFK while ratting in nullsec and then complaining that a wormholer jumped out and nuked your Ishtar. Like, be better. Play the game. Get involved. Do stuff. If you're dying and losing ships, it is your fault. That is a law of EVE Online. There is always a way to avoid losing your ship. Always. Always. Some of those ways absolutely suck. Like, I will talk for days about why smart bombing in low sec is the worst thing ever, right? Because it's one of the hardest things to avoid. Yes, you can avoid it. You can avoid it. It's just bloody hard to do. And the difficulty in avoiding it is inversely proportional to the ease of setting it up and the profitability of it. And that's not EVE Online. EVE Online is high risk, high reward. Low risk, low reward. That is the rule of EVE Online. So if you want higher rewards, you need higher risk. And increasing the risk in EVE Online actively increases your rewards. If you are the only person in your community able to actually jump out into a C5 and rat it without losing your ship, then that means you're more profitable than everyone else around you. You can do something that they can't. Instead of complaining that you're losing ships, get better at the game until you can do these things. EVE is a hard game. I know losing ships sucks. It does. I've lost hundreds of ships. I have lost. I had a weekend like a year ago where I lost a Tengu, a Loki, a Varga, a Golem, like literally about 10 billion ISK worth of ships over the space of 3 days. It sucks. It sucks to lose those ships, but embrace it, because by losing those ships, you should learn how not to lose them next time. Be better on D-Scan. Watch local if you have local available. Rat with friends around you. Stop trying to solo EVE Online. This is not a solo game. Even if you're a multi-boxer, it is still better to have real people around you too. Oh, but I keep getting destroyed because I'm flying alone in risky areas. It's because you're playing EVE wrong. You are playing EVE wrong. If you want a solo online experience, EVE Online is not it. EVE is a niche game, and that is fine, right? Oh, I'm getting angry here. Angry is the wrong word. I'm getting worked up. Because these are 3 uncomfortable truths that I just hear so many people refusing to acknowledge and refusing to actually accept. And if you can accept those 3 truths, you will love EVE Online. This game will be fantastic for you. It will be legendary experience after legendary experience with the kind of stories that you can tell your grandkids, for crying out loud. Genuinely, some of the stories I've heard from EVE Online are the kind of things you could honestly say to your grandkids one day. You've got little Jimmy sitting on your lap, and he's like, "Oh, Granddad, tell me a story back from your youth." You can sit there and say, "Ah, Jimmy, do you remember I remember the day that Pandemic Horde fell," or this kind of thing, right? It's amazing. This is a game that creates these kind of experiences. But you've got to understand that destruction is necessary in EVE Online. It is absolutely necessary. Embrace that. Having stuff destroyed in EVE Online is what is going to make you profitable. EVE is a PvP game by nature. Therefore, once you understand that and realize that even if you are just ratting or you are exploring in a ship that doesn't even have guns or drones, it's still PvP. Just A, you're the prey, and B, you're competing against other players in terms of the loot and profitability, then you're going to, get on better with things. Thirdly, the most important one, EVE is a niche game, and that is fine. If EVE is not the game for you, that is fine. As sad as I am to hear people leave the game, I'm also happy that they found something that they're enjoying. They've got something that they can do, that they can have fun with. And if EVE Online isn't fun for you, it's pointless trying to force a round peg into a square hole. Go find your round hole. Wow, that's something to be heard out of context. If you've made it this far into the video, join me with a crying face in the conversation down below, because what a saying. Find your round hole. But anyway, folks, that's all I want to say today. It's been a nice nearly 30-minute rant about the uncomfortable truths of EVE Online, and hopefully if you stuck around to this point in the video, you've understood the game a bit better and maybe understood yourself a bit better. I'm hoping some of you are sitting here listening to this screaming, yes, this is why we love this game. This is why it's amazing. This is why it does so well. Finally, someone gets it. You might be someone sitting there going, no, he's completely wrong. And I'm sorry, I'm just not wrong on this one. I'm really not wrong on any of those things. They are all categorical facts based on what the developers have said, based on how the game is set up, and how all design decisions are made. It's as simple as that. Thank you for listening to me ramble on for nearly 30 minutes about the 3 most uncomfortable truths in EVE Online. Hopefully you can relate to some of them. Would love to know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below as to which of these you think is the most important. Tell me stories about your experiences in EVE Online. What have you enjoyed most? What do you enjoy doing most in-game? Tell me the most epic thing that has ever happened to you in New Eden. Otherwise, folks, thank you for listening right the way through to the end. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.